Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm going to be talking about the latest Marvel film, Captain Marvel. This is the latest Marvel film, like I said. It does take place actually before all the other MCU films. It takes place in the 1990s, so it's way before Iron Man, way before The Incredible Hulk, way before all those Phase 1 films. So this happens way before all the other films, but it's most relevant to what we're currently at in the Marvel Cinematic Universe due to all the stuff going on with Avengers Infinity War and where we're going with Avengers Endgame. So that's kind of why this film came out as late as it did, but why it's also a film that takes place earlier in the timeline instead of right now. So that's kind of why this film takes place in the 90s. So overall, for this film, you guys, it's about Carol Danvers, who is a pilot on Earth. A series of events happen to her to why people think she was long dead. But where we're currently at in the timeline in the 90s is she's this alien named Veers, and she works for this like super team of some kind out in space, and they take out alien threats and all this other stuff. And so basically something goes wrong. She gets back to Earth as Veers, even though the people who once remembered her call her Carol Danvers as this pilot. And she gets back to Earth. She starts having even more flashbacks than she did when she was up in space because she was having them in dream form up there. And so she's starting to remember this past she once has that she doesn't remember. And so she's trying to piece everything together, who exactly she was. People are calling her Carol Danvers, but what exactly does that mean? What is the past of Carol Danvers? How does that relate to Veers? Why is her name Veers and not Carol Danvers? So there's all this mystery that we're trying to figure out over the course of Captain Marvel. And weirdly enough, she's not really even called Captain Marvel throughout this movie. They kind of reference that Marvel part of her name later on. Like they kind of clarify why that's related to her and stuff like that. But she's never really called Captain Marvel in this film, strangely enough. So throughout the course of this film, she's trying to figure out who she is. It's a film of self-discovery while also trying to stop this alien race that's a threat to Earth, and these aliens can take the form of people at any time they want. If they see that person, they can take form of them and stuff like that. And then there's another alien race that could potentially be a threat of one of her own kind, and so she has to figure out if that team slash person is good or not. So there's all that going on. So that's all over the course of the film Captain Marvel. So overall, guys, I liked this movie. I didn't love this movie. I think we definitely have had better Marvel films in the past. Um, I like this film though. I think we've had worse. For those who really know me, I wasn't a big fan of that first Ant-Man movie. That film really didn't work for me. Wasn't a big fan of The Incredible Hulk with Edward Norton. And I also wasn't a big fan of, what was the other one? I don't know the other one, but another one that I remember not being super impressed with was Thor: The Dark World, like a lot of people were. So there's a lot of films in the MCU that aren't masterpieces, but I think Captain Marvel is kind of above those films I just mentioned, but not by a lot. I enjoyed the movie. Am I going to go back to it? Maybe not. Maybe if it's on TV in the near future or not, maybe I can do it that way. Really can't personally see myself watching this specific film again, though, just out of the sake of interest or anything like that. But enjoyable film. Let's go over some positives and negatives of why I feel that way about Captain Marvel. So, for my positives of this film, you guys, I do like the overall journey of figuring out who Carol Danvers is. Why can't she remember anything? Um, how come she's always having these flashbacks, and how are they relate to her, and how can she form that person she once was and kind of go back to that life if she chooses to do so based on these flashbacks. So figuring out who Carol Danvers were, I thought was an interesting mystery of the film. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And I know Brie Larson's getting a lot of crap in the media right now about her performance in the movie. I thought she was good in this movie. I definitely understood why she portrayed the character the way she did. It's kind of a combination of fish out of water meets seriousness. So it's kind of a little bit of Captain America, a little bit of Thor, while also kind of doing her own thing. So I thought that was kind of smart on her end. Maybe a little more emotion could have helped, but for the most part, I think she portrayed this performance the best she could, and in a way that kind of fits this character the best and fits her the best and stuff like that. So good performance from her overall. I'll list it as a positive here in my review for it. Samuel L. Jackson, as always, is really good in this movie. I definitely like how we get to see a younger Nick Fury. I definitely feel like we're watching a younger Nick Fury too here. I feel like a lot of the lessons he's learned throughout the Avengers and other Marvel films hasn't happened yet. So this clearly is in the 90s because this is a younger Nick Fury that doesn't know as much about that kind of stuff yet. So I thought he handled that very well, and I thought his de aging effect for making him look younger, I thought was very effective and believable too. Ben Mendelsohn from Ready Player One and Star Wars Rogue One, or Rogue One, a Star Wars story, or whatever that ended up being called. He has a role in this film, mostly as a villain, I would say. They definitely play off of his humor in this movie. There's a lot of things that he gets to on Earth that he doesn't quite understand because he's an alien, and so they play off of that a lot. So I thought his sense of humor was a lot of fun to watch in this movie, and overall, it made his character more fun to watch in this movie as well. There's a character named Goose the cat in this movie, and it literally is a cat named Goose, possibly to a reference to Top Gun, possibly. Um, Really fun character. Every time that it's supposed to be a funny moment with Goose, it was a laugh out loud moment. Very effective character. Really like the presence of this character. Very cute character. Very fun cat that they used in this movie. I also like the fighter pilot scenes in the movie whenever they show Carol Danvers as this pilot before she became Veers. I thought those scenes are very fun. They're very intense. Whenever she's crash landing or flying a plane or flying a jet or whatever, or it's about to crash land into a tree or something, it does feel very intense. So I thought the fighter pilot scenes where we see her doing those things were very intense and a lot of fun to watch. For my negatives of Captain Marvel, though, I thought the visual style of this film was really not very consistent. There's scenes where they feel like they're done by different directors. So we go from scene one, different director, scene two feels like a different person, scene three feels like a different person. I would say it's most clear and most visible when we go from a space scene to an Earth scene to an Earth scene to a space station scene to a space station scene to a sky scene and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things in this movie where it just feels inconsistent with its visual style. There's some scenes that also look too dark for their own good, and not dark like, oh, that's Dark Knight kind of dark. It's just dark like I can't really see what's going on kind of dark. So I thought some of the lighting in this film too possibly could have been better. I also thought there wasn't enough villainous focus in this film. Without spoiling anything, you think it's one villain and it really is something else, and how they transition to that really isn't very clear, and it's just kind of out of nowhere and kind of random. I just felt like, but when I left the theater, I was just like, who exactly was the villain of this movie? And it just didn't feel very clear to me. It felt like the film just didn't have enough time to focus on that with all the millions of other things that they wanted to cover in this movie. So I thought the villainous focus could have been handled better in this movie. I also thought that this film didn't have enough action. There really wasn't enough action in this movie. Um, I would say, besides maybe the beginning and the end, there really isn't a lot of action in this movie at all. There's like small flavors of it. Like I said, there's those fighter pilot scenes that were really enjoyable. But for the most part, there really isn't a lot of action in this movie. I really felt like this film could have benefited more from that. So maybe a better script for the movie with more action scenes in them, I think would have helped this film a lot. I also thought there wasn't any kind of unique narrative used. The closest we got, I would say, is there's a scene with Ben Mendelsohn trying to search through Brie Larson's mind with her flashbacks and trying to learn more about her and stuff like that. And they kind of talk over her flashbacks. And I thought that was the closest thing we got to a unique narrative for a Marvel movie. Besides that scene, though, there really wasn't a narrative used in this movie that felt unique or a specific voice used for this movie. So once again, I don't know if that's too many directors in the room, too many writers in the room, too many heads in the room trying to figure out what kind of film they want to make here. I thought the overall narrative could have been better and more unique for this movie. This film is also not very original. Almost everything they use in this movie just felt like it belonged from a different movie, felt like a different Marvel film covered it already in a different way and in a better way. I just felt every good thing about this movie was handled better in an earlier Marvel film and more interesting in earlier Marvel films. So for me personally, if you're going to make Captain Marvel, try to make it original, try to make it different, try to make it stand out from the crowd. They tried to make it feel like it fit into everything that happened earlier, and as a result, it just doesn't feel very original and it doesn't feel very fresh anymore. It's also not a very rewatchable film. Besides it being on maybe TV in a couple of years, I really can't see myself rewatching this film a lot. I don't know if I enjoyed it that much. So, as far as rewatchable Marvel films, probably not the most rewatchable of the bunch, unfortunately. I also didn't like in this film how Shield felt like a police force. I never really viewed Shield that way. This is the first Marvel film where I feel like they kind of portrayed it that way. I always kind of viewed Shield as a secretive organization and trying to figure out what's best for people and figuring out, which superheroes they can recruit for that Avengers team and stuff like that. I get it. It's the 90s. Shield probably hasn't completely figured out who they are yet, but they felt like police officers in this movie. It felt like Samuel L. Jackson was a police officer, and same was Agent Coulson. They didn't really feel like agents or they belonged for like a secret organization or anything like that. It really did feel like a police force, and I don't know if Shield is meant to feel like that at all. But overall, I'm going to give Captain Marvel an 8 out of 10. I like it. It's a good movie. It's not a great movie though. There's a lot of things going against it that make me just call it good and not great. So it's enjoyable. I liked it. There's enough flaws going against it though, where it's not one of the better Marvel films. And like I said, I really can't call it great just because there's so much working against it to the point where I just can't call it that. I can only call it good. I can't call it great. So if you're a hardcore Marvel fan, go out and see it. If you're really not big into the whole Marvel film thing, you could probably wait till Redbox. So 8 out of 10 for me. Good film, not a great film.